What we're going to look at on this portion of the walk are two of the BMPs here on the Needham site. The first is an infiltration basin that was designed to infiltrate the roof runoff from the new garage building. Water is collected on the roof, downspouts, roof leaders coming down. You can see the trench across the parking lot, discharges there, and into this first bay of the infiltration basin. As the water fills up, it reaches the overflow, flows out and discharges into the second bay of the retention basin. As it fills up, overflows into the other 24-inch catch basin top, and from there, it discharges into the stream on the other side of the driveway. The way these are sized, this one was designed with a 1/2 inch of runoff from the entire roof per the current Mass Stormwater standards. And that volume is calculated, and you need to provide that volume in the basin below the initial overflow. So that's your design volume. So you calculate that, and that's what drives the size of your overall structure. With the new permit, as I was mentioned earlier in the intro, this is a redevelopment project. They took a garage, or constructed a garage, on an existing parking area. So it's clearly redevelopment, and what that would trigger is the need to infiltrate or retain on site 0.8 inches of runoff. So it'd be an increase from 0.5 or 1/2 inch to 0.8 inches, or just over 3/4 of an inch. So if this was designed under the current MS4 requirements, it would have to be 50% larger. If this was a new development, you would be looking at a full inch of retention. So you would go from a 1/2 inch of volume in this area to a full inch of volume. So this would get basically double in size of what it is now to meet those new permit requirements. And what Mary passed out for me is our standard checklist for a recent project we did in South Hadley, Mass. And it's customized for that project, but is a good representation of what your O&M stormwater checklist would be for a site like this that has multiple different BMPs. So in this case, we're looking at infiltration basin. On this sample list, there's two of them, numbers 6 and 7, are identical based on the project we did there. So if you were inspecting this as part of your MS4 inspections for your SWIP, you'd be looking at a number of things. Obviously, is vegetation cover, undesirable vegetation, undesirable woody vegetation, or any of that stuff present that would impact the ability of this to function. In this particular case, overall it's in good condition, but I would definitely say and note in the report that you have side slopes that don't have much vegetation here and on the lower portion. And a good remedy for that is this is extremely steep. To get something to grow on that, the chances are pretty slim. It's steeper than 2 to 1. So I would suggest that you come back in, grade that out with a grade awl, maybe pull it back closer to the curb and then reseed it, because what you don't want is have an infiltration basin that's all soil, because now you're reintroducing sediment into your runoff. One of the biggest problems you'll see is a blocked outlet structure. Here, these are pretty large outlets given the size of the structure, and because this is taking only roof runoff, you're not going to get as much debris from the actual flow. What you are going to get is debris that could get blown in here. Your Dunkin' Donuts cups, your napkins, and you want to be very careful that your outlet is always clear. You usually want scour protection at the end of any pipe that's outletting into your basins. The same idea that you don't want to create erosion, introduce sediment into an area where you're trying to remove sediment. From a design standpoint, you would need to design this to be able to handle the 100-year storm and not overtop. So if we had 6.5, 7 inches of rain tomorrow, this would need to function, overflow to here, overflow to there, and flow out without overtopping the banks and then flooding the DPW facility itself. With something like this, these are supposed to dry within 72 hours. So your vegetation, a lot of times, either you have them fully grassed with a grass that can tolerate being submerged. They have different mixes. I know there's a number of companies out there that have detention basin mixes, they call them, or retention basin mixes that can withstand inundation. So if you just want to seed it, you can do that, but you want it to be pretty much covered. You don't want bare spots and things like that. You want it to be covered as much as possible. The other option is to plant it with actual plants to get more of a bioretention aspect to it. That is, you want to be careful of that and pick the right plants. A lot of people's first reaction is, oh, this is wet, we got to put in some wetland plants. They'll die within a few weeks because wetland plants need to have their roots wet all the time. and this is not a wetland. It's going to be completely dry within a day or two. This is only really wet because it rained, 6 hours ago. So you want to pick actually drought tolerant species for that. And we have a landscape architects on staff that really help us picking the plants. I usually know what I want to accomplish, but I don't know the actual species. But those are the two things you would put in something like this. Yeah, the short answer is yes, because the peak flow attenuation portion of the regulations has been there for a long time, and that's still going to be there. It's not as big of a deal on a redevelopment site because you're comparing to what it is now. So this was originally a parking lot, so the increase in impervious is actually zero. You just went from a parking lot to a roof. But on a new development site, you still need to have significant pure detention to account for the peak flow, in addition to stormwater renovation, infiltration. It will be smaller when you do these decentralized pieces. We've done developments where you can almost fully rely on a number of these smaller detention basins in areas, but you almost always need a peak flow attenuation before you discharge your final receiving body. It's just, it's very strict, and it's, yeah. Shall we walk?
Well, if I thought there were two basins, is that really just a matter of the site
Walkway.
Constraints? You've got a walkway?
Yeah.
Okay, there's no design advantage to doing it.
That's actually a good point, is that this is on a slight incline. So if you look at it here, one design advantage would be is that you could have a shallow pool there, a shallow pool here, instead of digging a big deep hole or putting a big berm at this end. So you can kind of step it down the hill. They did that mostly because they wanted to keep the walkway. So this is actually a really nice site because it's so flat. But when you get into some areas that are really hilly or really mountainous, you got to get creative with that. Yeah. And one thing to watch out for, actually, speaking of berms on detention basins, is DEP in a lot of states, Mass and Connecticut, definitely will consider a downstream side of a detention basin a dam at times. And that comes up only in really large projects, really large basins, things like that. But it is something to be aware of. If you're going to put this huge earthen dam in, somebody might say, geez, you guys are building a dam, that's not a detention basin. And if there's a potential downstream impact, that's something you might have to be aware of. So.